All right, this is part two of the Braver Angels panel discussion. They're supposed to reflect a pretty broad political spectrum. I tend to think that they're mostly liberals, but at any rate, they've been talking about Kyle Rittenhouse, and they're being led by a man by the name of Randy Lioz, who's going to be reading an essay that he wrote that's pretty balanced, amazingly balanced, and they're reacting to it. And the reason why I really think that this is a good discussion is these are your typical jury members. And so how they react to the news as it unfolds is kind of important for us to note. So without further ado, let's get her started.
And go ahead and make your point.
Do we know how he got the gun? Because he's 17. Should he have been able to buy a gun?
Yeah, that's actually a complex aspect of the story itself. So he had a local friend. So he lives in Illinois, but actually frequently visited the Kenosha area, and he has a friend there whose dad had. So he actually took his stimulus money, his stimulus check, to buy the weapon, but his friend's dad required him to keep it locked up in his house, so he wouldn't be able to access it except for like target practice under a completely supervised environment. And the dad had actually taken it out of the safe because he was, I guess he was because of what was going on in the town. He felt safer having the gun in the house, and that's the reason that Kyle was actually able to get access to the gun. And the dad was super angry when he found out that Kyle had taken the gun without asking him.
He's done his homework. I don't know if he's gotten anything really major wrong there. The fact that Kyle used his stimulus money has been bandied around a lot. I don't know why anybody should care. What difference does it make? But for some reason, they always pull out, he used his stimulus money, and you notice that Randy kind of smiled a little bit as if there was something kind of wrong or illogical about that.
So the gun belonged to the friend's dad, or it belonged to Kyle?
I think I don't remember the exact detail. I think his friend might have done a straw purchase for him,
Yes, that's what happened.
but with the understanding that Kyle would never have access to that gun without supervision until his 18th birthday.
And that's a pretty fair treatment. Is that a straw purchase? Well, the courts will have to figure that one out. But whatever the case, at least he's got it accurate. And I'll guarantee you one thing, none of the panelists there knew this.
Thank you. Chip, I see your hand raised.
Hi. Thank you to all who are participating. I appreciate the goodwill. I have trouble wrapping my head around, and I recognize Kyle's 17 years old, so he's not perhaps thinking things through to a logical end. But I have trouble understanding this idea of wanting to provide medical support, and he came with a gun. And I'm thinking of the many people who served in the military who were conscientious objectors and put themselves in harm's way, armed only with medical kit. Now, I don't expect Kyle to know all of that, but it's just very difficult to get my head around the paradox of, I brought a gun, but I'm here to provide medical care.
Okay, another person who just doesn't understand that EMT, who do not typically carry guns, will not go into war zones. This is unlike a conscientious objector. A lot of the people who were providing medical services, because even though they were unarmed, they had no choice. They were in the military. They were drafted. They had to do it. Kyle is doing this purely voluntarily. And so he's going into an area that has not been secured, and he's carrying protection with him. EMTs won't do it. As soon as you tell them the police have not secured this area, they will not go in. We know that from the Chop Zone fiasco, right? They had a couple people shot, were bleeding out, and the EMTs would not go in there because the police had not secured it. I think it's a really, really bad analogy or comparison to consider Kyle like a conscientious objector in a military. It's not the same.
I think his interest in fame overrides everything else, I'm afraid, but I'm being judgmental.
We have time for one more comment. Deborah, do you want to go ahead and unmute yourself?
Yes, I just wanted to say that I don't feel that his need for fame or his expressions of wanting to be a hero, or it's actually to be seen. And I don't see there anything in that itself negative or anti-benevolent or whatever we're saying about him. We're seeing this young man is isolated, confused, maybe has mental health issues. Anyway, I just want to say that his strong need to be seen and to do good too, maybe in a confused way. It breaks my heart what happened.
Wow. Okay. So Kyle has in him a sense of duty. He has a sense of community. He sees his community under attack, and therefore he volunteers himself to go in and try to do something about it. And in her mind, well, he must be mentally ill. She is so far removed from the idea that a young kid of 17, and keep in mind, he's only about 4 months from his 18th birthday, and Audie Murphy, who won numerous medals overseas during World War II, was younger than Kyle, okay? And he volunteered. He joined voluntarily. He even faked his birth date to try to get in. So the idea that Kyle, well, he must be mentally ill. Only a freak would go around and try to help people during times of strife. I mean, what kind of weirdo does something like that? He should have been more normal, more like us, cowering inside our homes, calling 911 to have the police come and get you, even though you know they're not going to. In her mind, that is much more rational, much more normal than going out there and taking on the strife and doing something about it.
Seeing this young man, 17 years old, he's not seen. He's alienated. He's isolated. He's living in a culture where he's not seen. He's craving that. And he sees this moment where he thinks he can actually do good. It's actually quite heartbreaking.
Right. So we can psychoanalyze Kyle Rittenhouse, even though we have never met him. We have not even heard him much. I mean, he hasn't been on television talking too much other than some of the comments he's made to those reporters. But so we can psychoanalyze him. We can say he's confused. He's isolated. He's lonely. How do you know? And again, this thing about it's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking that a kid would take it upon his own initiative to go out there and try to help people, even though the situation is dangerous.
So
I absolutely agree with you, and I'll certainly have more to say about that as we continue. So I'm going to once again go to my shared screen. McGinnis was still with Rittenhouse when the night went fully south, beginning with his confrontation with his first victim, Joseph Rosenbaum. And here's where we encounter one of the main problems standing in the way of a clear-eyed understanding of what happened and why. To get such an understanding requires progressives be willing to take a fair look at Rittenhouse's claim of self-defense, even as we maintain a healthy skepticism of the motivations of many of those touting it. And to do that requires that we actually look at the people he shot, especially the first.
Wow. Okay. Randy Lioz is actually doing an excellent job here. He is saying, hey, you know what? We always talk about this. We can't blame the victim. In this case here, we have a self-defense claim. We need to look at the backgrounds of these people. Even though we may not want to be fair, we have to do that because we have no trouble looking into Kyle's background, none whatsoever. So why not them?
Shoot me! Shoot me! Bust on me!
We should certainly take into account the fact that Rosenbaum was chasing Rittenhouse across a parking lot. And in the moment right before the fatal shooting, another person in that lot clearly fired a gun into the air. And the only close-up eyewitness account of the shooting has the victim grabbing for the gun of the shooter to take it from him. Now, this is a video that has the entire incident from multiple camera angles. So it takes a lot of the available cell phone footage that was taken that night and sews it together, synchronizes it, and allows us to see as much as we can see in this instance.
By the way, Orkanut does a better job of this synchronization thing. So in the previous clip there, he showed Rosenbaum. I'm not sure the 12 panelists there really know who that is.
Now, I just another warning that we kind of went back and forth about how much of this to show, and we decided that, you know, it's very important to the discussion. So I'm gonna be showing the video mostly in its entirety, and I'm gonna stop and point out relevant aspects of the video as we go. So hopefully that'll work out as a presentation technique.
Amazingly, usually when you think about showing these graphic details, you think about kids. Like, well, what if children see this, right? Here, these people are all like in their 50s and 60s, but we have to still consider, what can we show here? I mean, what could rattle them really badly? Oh, come on, show it all. If a man's brains are being scooped up back into his skull, show it. Hell, when I was in high school, we had to watch that crap in those driving demonstration or driving warning films. If we had to watch that, they can watch this.
So what's relevant there is that people were destroying cars in that used car lot. The banging, the clanging that you heard was people hitting cars with like baseball bats and whatever else they had around. They were trying to destroy those cars. This is the moment when we pan over to where Rosenbaum is about to give chase to Rittenhouse, and there's some pretty good evidence that he has actually mistakenly associated with him with someone who he encountered earlier in the night, who was trying to extinguish dumpster fires. And so this is when the incident kicks off.
Amazingly, he's going to show the video footage. These people have not seen this. I can guarantee you that of all those, I don't know if there's 12 or something like that, but of all those people, they haven't seen this. They've only seen what the news media has shown them. And get ready, put on your seatbelts. This is not going to be pleasant, at least to this political psyche.
So here's Kyle right here, and this is Rosenbaum. And you can see in his right hand is a plastic bag. He had actually gone to the store to try to pick up his medication, but he wasn't able to, but he had other stuff in the bag from the store. So this is when this chase starts.
Oh, he got a gun! He got a gun!
All right, so you're about to hear the sound of gunfire, one shot that is going to come from the left side over here. Okay, so there was someone in the crowd that fired a gun into the air. You see Kyle over here. You see Rosenbaum right here chasing him. And then right behind them is going to be Richard McGinnis, the reporter who had been talking to them earlier in the night. Okay, so and it is tough to see exactly what happens. The camera actually shakes a little bit just at the moment when Kyle fires at Joseph for the first time.
At this time, they didn't know who had actually fired the gun. I think it was V Radio that uncovered it, or was it 4chan, who went through a lot of legwork to uncover the identity of the person that did it. It was Joshua Ziminski. There is a new video out where V Radio gets into it with Josh Ziminski. You ought to go and watch that. I'll put a link to it in the description below. Fascinating.
So that was the gunshot from over here. Okay, that poppy you just heard. And so
Ziminski.
Kyle, at that moment, turns around, and the gunshot that he just heard comes from basically the same direction as the guy who was chasing him. Okay, and then and McGinnis, I think, is right about here, and apparently McGinnis, after the first shot from Kyle, thought he had been shot because he felt something on his leg, and it might have been debris as a bullet kicked up some debris from the ground. So you can see the moment when Rosenbaum goes down. Here's McGinnis. Rosenbaum is now lying right here, and Kyle has doubled back around this car and is about to check out what he has done. Now, there's going to be 3 more shots, and we don't know where those came from, but the fact is there's been gunfire that has been happening in the streets kind of all night. And we're going to see that even later in the video.
The gunshots came from the opposite side of where Kyle is. In other words, Kyle was running into the direction of a mob, and the gunshots came from there. So somebody in that mob that Kyle was running towards had a gun and opened fire. What he was shooting at, nobody knows.
So McGinnis is taking off his shirt and trying to wrap up. Wounds, and Kyle takes out his phone. He was calling his friend, last name Black, that had given him the gun. They're saying,
this dude running did it.
So this is all happening in real time.
Take screenshots. That dude shot him. That nigga just shot that dude.
Where?
Cranium that boy. He just shot a man.
He's right here in his head.
And also, what's relevant is there is a little bit of a head wound, but he was grazed by a bullet in his head. The real shot that killed Jojo Rosenbaum was actually in his back, from what I saw, and nobody saw that because he was lying on his back, and so they thought it was the most dangerous thing was a head wound, and so that's what they were addressing.
Just as a quick note, the bullet went way down through his back. It's pretty clear as to what happened. He was lunging after Kyle's rifle, and Kyle got a shot off at him right as he stumbled. And there's little doubt now, I think, that that's what happened. It wasn't like Rosenbaum turned around and Kyle shot him. Didn't happen.
So.
Come on! You shot it!
This, so Gage Grosskreutz, is he's the guy who I mentioned earlier who has a medic kit and a handgun with him. Okay?
And probably some booze.
Okay, and this is his cell phone. He was live. He was broadcasting live at this point. So that's very relevant for a little bit later in the video.
Hey, what are you doing? You shot somebody?
I want to get police.
Who shot? Who shot? Hey, stop him!
So someone has just punched Kyle in the back of the head, I believe.
Yeah, he didn't say anything about Anthony Huber actually trying to kill him with a skateboard in the first attempt, but that's understandable. I didn't even know about that until fairly recently.
All right, so what's about to happen, Kyle has just gone down. This guy is going to drop kick him, and then the second person who he wound up killing, Anthony Huber, is going to come from the left side with his skateboard, and he's going to actually try to take the gun from Kyle. So this is Anthony Huber trying to reach for the gun as he is hitting Kyle with his skateboard, and he hits him in the back of the head. And that was unfortunately the fatal shot. This is Gage Grosskreutz, who we saw asking him a few seconds ago, who's shot? This guy has a medic kit, but he also has a gun in his right hand. So he had put up his hands at first, and then he lowered his hand to take a shot at Kyle, and that's when Kyle shot him, apparently. So here's him with his hands up, and then he goes to shoot Kyle. And what's also relevant in my mind is this guy realizes that he is not going to be able to confront Kyle. And so he backs off, and Kyle does not attack him.
A pretty fair telling. Keep in mind, Randy is not a conservative. He's not a pro-Trumper. This guy's a liberal. And what he did was he looked at the evidence. He saw, he watched, And he's putting together a pretty good narrative here. I don't see any real serious problems with anything he is saying. He's left out a few things. For the most part, this is one of the most balanced treatments you can possibly expect from somebody who is not really hanging out on the Kyle Rittenhouse side.
Oh, shit. People are getting shot all around us. People are just getting shot everywhere, guys.
And that is Gage Grosskreutz yelling out that he needs a medic because he was shot in the arm. It was a pretty bad gunshot.
Move! Take this. Take this. Take this,
I need a fucking medic! Everybody get on the back!
I have a question. What happened to his cap? Somebody's got it. Can you imagine what that cap is worth? I'm not kidding you. I bet there will be a lot of people willing to pay some good money for Kyle Rittenhouse's cap.
And so Kyle is right now putting his hands up to try to surrender to the police. And they have gotten a report of gunshots, so they're about to go check out the scene. And nobody really knows. The police don't know who the shooter is, so they just see some kid in the street who is getting in their way.
Hey, he just shot them! Hey, dude right here just shot them! Dude right here just shot all of them down there! That dude just shot them right there! That dude right here! Here!
Injured straight ahead. Someone injured straight ahead. Get out of the road! Get out of the road! Get down there! God damn it!
So they're just telling him to get out of the road. Okay. So what I wrote was, in the scene that followed, it's also pertinent that Rittenhouse was being chased by a group that was trying to disarm him and received a drop kick followed by a skateboard to the head as one person tried to grab his gun and another approached him with a pistol. With a situation like this, I think it's important to look inward. With all of these factors piling up, who do we think we'd be in this situation? We can choose to assume the best of ourselves as we think the worst of Rittenhouse, but I think that's a disingenuous approach. Sure, what you're thinking now, if you're a progressive like me, is a fair point. We wouldn't be in the middle of a hostile crowd with an AR-style long gun. But what this points to is that the conversation should seriously focus around why he was there in the first place, to the points that were brought up earlier. And our reactions to this catastrophe point to the very reason anyone would be there in the first place. We have come to embrace only the aspects of the story that support our narrative.
What a great comment. We have come to believe only that which supports our narrative.
And it amps up the rage on both sides, to the point where we're driven blind to any nuance. This bullied boy, who had come to Kenosha convinced that he was doing right by history and those around him, found himself in an utterly terrifying situation, and he did exactly what we would expect him to do. So here are the questions. What do you think that you would do in this situation? And does it align with what you think is morally right? What I kind of wonder is, how many people have done thought experiments like this, trying to imagine themselves in certain situations, perhaps the news or historical situations, to think about whether they would do the right but difficult thing? And how many of you, if you have done a thought experiment like that, came away from it feeling better about yourself, more confident that you would have been on the right side of history? And I think this is really relevant to what I think perhaps either Susan or Marietta brought up before about the influences that Kyle was subject to. Has the proliferation of videos with real violence desensitized us to it and made it easier to pull the trigger.
I'll answer that second one. I think it's just the opposite. I think we need to see more of the real violence. I have a feeling that a lot of people just don't understand what can happen in these situations. And perfect example is how they reacted to the AR-15 rifle. He's carrying a freaking rifle. And what are you doing? Well, let's just go chase him down with a skateboard and not hit him. At no point did they really deep down understand what that rifle would do to them. Because I don't think they've seen enough real violence. They haven't seen what a gunshot wound looks like. They've been shielded from it all the time. It's always, oh, this is too graphic for most audiences. We better not see this. I don't know. Tell me what you think in the description below.
So with that, I'm going to stop my share and go back to the discussion. I'll put the questions up on my background. And Susan, you can go ahead and take it away.
Okay, I'm looking for some blue hands here. Don't see any. So I'll say something, which is, when I watched this video and I saw Kyle down on the ground with people coming at him, I realized to my dismay that had I had a gun, I would have been so scared out of my mind that I would have shot. At that moment, I saw self-defense.
This is a liberal. Again, a typical jury member. But then she is actually being shown the video. She's being forced to watch what actually happened. A lot of people out there have not. They've only been fed with that which the news media wanted them to see. And by the way, I tend to agree with her. I think that I would have probably blasted 8 or 9 people. You all think, oh no, not me. I'm cool and calm. Until you're in Kyle's position, you don't know how you're going to react. And although I'd love to think that I'm going to be the coolest character out there, you don't know. Maybe I might have shot the dude with had his hands up. You know? The guy there, yeah, I might have shot him too. You know, Kyle didn't. Pretty good. And in fact, I don't know if Kyle could have exercised more restraint than he did. What else could he have done? Every time he opened fire, every time he squeezed that throttle, it was for a very good reason. He had to.
And I think to myself, if I were 17 and had the background that he had, I can't imagine making a different decision than that. So I will hush up and invite Susan Rico to speak. Unmute yourself, Susan. Go ahead.
Yes, I hear, Susan, what you're saying about the self-defense, and I feel in his position, I would feel the same. I also feel that those who saw him running away and hearing what he had done might have thought they were stopping a mass shooting.
Yeah, well, they can think whatever they like. It doesn't matter. The motives of the attackers has no bearing on anything. And so it doesn't take away his right to self-defense. She might know that, but I'm just saying.
So I think I can empathize on both sides of that.
Yeah. Thank you. Carrie, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I think that...
Oh, no, not this dude. Okay. There's always one person in the panel who can't stay on topic. He is a BLM earth muffin, and he is going to talk BLM whenever he gets the opportunity. We're not talking about that now, but here we go.
The most striking thing to me was when Kyle was walking down the street with a humongous gun, and the police heard that there was somebody shot, and they looked at him and said, "Step aside, young man." I imagine race will be part of this discussion, and maybe I'll kick it off. Had he been black, I don't know if he would have lasted 10 seconds.
Conjecture, you don't know that. And keep in mind, he said, the most striking thing to me was when he was walking. No, the most striking thing to me was when he's pulling the trigger. That to me was pretty striking. When he blew Gage Grosskreuz's arm almost in half, that was pretty striking. When he shot Anthony Huber right in the chest and Anthony Huber died right there, that was the most striking thing. Not him walking to the police. And that's how bad these people are at this. They really, really want this to be a race discussion. They don't want to talk about whether it was self-defense or not.
He probably would have been shot 50 times over, you know? And so that knowledge that Kyle knew he'll be protected by the police because he had that privilege probably helped him come to the decision that, yeah, it's okay to be there.
Yeah, as opposed to going into the mob. I'm sure he would have felt really comfortable with them. By the way, that mob that was attacking him were all pro-BLM. And he didn't feel too comfortable with them. Why? Because they attacked him. They tried to kill him. So yeah, maybe he felt more comfortable being with the police. I think he had a good reason to.
Because I have law enforcement on my side, which is tragic in so many ways.
Yeah, having law enforcement on your side is so tragic. Well, maybe do the things it takes to have law enforcement on your side, like being a good person. You know, might try that sometime. This dude just pisses me off more than any of them. I think that the rest of these people are pretty nice people overall. This guy can go to hell.
So that's my comment.
And Susan, I just wanted to point out that Phil was trying to raise his hand, but can't do it because he's a co-host. So.
Oh, Phil, I'm sorry. Then I'll put you in the front of the line since I missed you. Phil, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Thank you, Randy. So I, like many people, I was struck by the overlapping tragedies on view here in this incredibly tightly packed series of videos that Randy showed. So there's putting aside for a second the tragedy of Kyle Rittenhouse and putting aside for a second the tragedy of victims, there is in the background the tragedy of America's cities is also evident. So it's no accident that Rittenhouse and Walsh, the older guy with the gun, when they're having the earlier discussion, talk to one another as if they're about to walk into a war zone. That's exactly the conversation they had. What's your equipment? What's your training? And then, having had their rifles slung loosely by their side, they raise them slightly and do what's called covering the trigger. They're ready. And then they walk down the block. Everybody on this call has seen those kind of blocks where you're smart enough to know, don't turn around and go back. There are those kind of blocks in every American city, almost every one. This particular night on that block, as Randy has pointed out, there were cars being set on fire and smashed. There were dumpster fires being set, and there was random gunshots everywhere. It was a war zone. Where were the police, you may ask? They show up at the end of the video in armored cars. There are American cities where the police can only go in armored cars. That's a useful thing to think about. To me, it's particularly telling because I saw exactly the same scenes in exactly the same unfolding in exactly the same way in 1968 when I was in the middle of the Newark riots. They looked exactly the same.
Phil, I'm going to stop you there for a second because we're a little bit over time. That's been about 2 minutes.
No, thank you,
Thank
Susan.
you for that comment. And we have Vicky would like to say something. Vicky, go ahead and unmute yourself.
By the way, he made a very interesting comment. The police, yeah, they're there. They're in armored cars. Obviously, it must be pretty hostile out there. Kyle doesn't have an armored car. He's walking around with really no protection other than his rifle.
I suppose this shows my filtering system, but to me, this shows the tragedy of having guns in America. Guns are meant to be in military situations and hunting situations, none of which apply in this case. And those who are supposed to have guns in a normal country would be trained to use those guns and not to panic. That's exactly what military training does to you. And but this gun was in the hands of a 17-year-old. It
who handled it very well.
should never have been.
Should never have been in the hands of a 17-year-old. I mean, can you imagine a 17-year-old like Audie Murphy handling a gun? Oh my God. He could do horrible things with that, like shoot enemy troops and stuff.
Of course he acted the way we would expect him to as a 17-year-old, but he should not have had a gun. It should not have been that easy for him to get a gun.
Thank you, Vicki. Barbara, you wanted to say something.
Yeah, to Phil's point, I mean, to me, watching that, it looked like a third world country or a war zone, and the fog of war, a fog of war type situation where there was gunfire, there were cars being ignited, and in a situation like that, someone who isn't trained, or sometimes even someone who is going to probably take the most aggressive action possible to protect themselves or to save themselves. But it goes back to something that we all, many of us have brought up before. How does one come to be in that situation? And not just Kyle Rittenhouse, any of the people there doing what they were doing. In those videos, there were no peaceful protesters, or at least there didn't seem to be peaceful protests going on. What gives rise to a situation like that, where peaceful protest is justified, but looting, burning cars, creating a semblance of a war zone. I don't think any of us believe that's justified, but it happened all over the country. And why that happened, I think, is an underlying question that we need to explore. Probably not in this call, but it happened all over the country. And why that happened, I think, is an underlying question that we need to explore. Probably not in this call, but at some point.
Okay, so she made a point that I don't agree with at all. She said that the untrained people like Kyle, when faced in this extreme hostility, are likely to do a very aggressive thing. Kyle didn't. And in fact, when Rosenbaum first attacked him, Kyle ran. He didn't shoot Rosenbaum. He probably could have. And then when he was chased by the mob, he could easily have just turned around and started firing at people. He didn't. He kept trying to make it to the police. And so Kyle did not take the most aggressive action that he could have.
I think we all need to think about that.
Thank you, Barbara. Gordon, you want something you wanted to say? Go ahead and unmute yourself.
Well, I'm sure not going to bring here any solutions, but I think we should face the things that we cannot change. There will be guns in America. There are guns in America, and there will be guns in America. They cannot be taken away. There's over 300 million of them, many not registered, my own included. It's not going to happen. Just as if we are not going to say it is too bad that people get addicted to drugs. I wish there were no drugs, illegal drugs. That's not going to happen either. We're going to, I wish there wasn't adultery, but it happened. We should accept that which we cannot change and look for ways to mitigate it and deal with the underlying problems here. But chasing after guns is not a solution, not worthwhile spending at least my time on.
Okay, so his point is, guys, you guys want to talk about a gun control argument. That's not what we're here to talk about. We're here to talk about Kyle Rittenhouse. Who was he? How did he act? Is he in the right? Let's not talk about gun control and also this whole BLM thing. Kyle shot a bunch of white dudes. This is not a race issue.
Thank you, Gordon. Carrie, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Yeah, thanks. So I've heard a number of people say that it looked like a war zone. And I've personally never been to war, but I've seen footage of war in like Serbia, Syria, and those images don't even come close to a war zone. It reminded me of when the Super Bowl 19, the 49ers won, my town erupted. There were people in the streets. There were people banging on things.
San Francisco.
There were probably some fights. That wasn't a war zone. I think that was a constitutionally protected freedom of speech.
Yeah, burning 137 cars is constitutionally protected speech. Okay, sure.
Say, I'm upset. And so let's say you break a car window.
Oh, yeah, just break a car window. That's all that happened in Kenosha. A car window is broken.
Saying, I'm upset. There's penalties for that.
Yeah. Ooh.
And it's certainly not being shot. So there's laws and rules to handle property damage. And so I see this view of Kyle and the fascination of his persona. Yet the whole reason for the protest was that Black people were being killed en masse without looking at their persona. They were just walking down the street. Boom, they're shot.
Yeah, they're just walking down the street and then boom, they're shot. This dude has no idea what the hell he's talking about. He still thinks in his mind that Kyle shot a whole bunch of people that were trying to destroy some cars. But they were trying to break just a few windows, and that's a constitutionally protected right. And here's Kyle, that Nazi, that white supremacist, and he's opening fire on them. That's what he thinks. Again, I actually think that what we have is assembled here a bunch of fairly well-reasoned people. They come from the left and the right, and they don't agree on everything, but they're sensible. They're willing to look at what happened, and then from that, be able to draw some conclusions and formulate some questions. But not this dude.
Kid has a toy gun. Boom, they're shot.
Yeah, okay, he's talking about Tamara Rice. Kid has a toy gun. Boom, he's shot. That is how these people react to these kind of events. It didn't happen quite like that.
And we don't delve into the lives of those people. George Floyd had a rich history of good and bad, and
mostly bad.
That doesn't seem to be discussed because he doesn't look like an adorable child. I guess the problem is that there were some Black children who were killed that were also adorable, and that Kyle seems to be given this grace. And I think the tragedy is that the other adorable Black kids weren't afforded this grace. Wouldn't it be wonderful if those young Black youths could have been given the grace that was given to Kyle, the forgiveness of walking down the street with a rifle during a protest? He wasn't killed. And wouldn't it be a wonderful place, again, if the police didn't have a history of violence towards Black people? That seems to be what the whole protest was about in the first place. So I don't want to lose sight of the fact of the reason why people were out in the streets in the first place was reflected in what happened with Kyle.
Okay, they're limited to 2 minutes. God, that seemed like 5 minutes, 10 minutes.
No.
Chip, go ahead, unmute yourself. Yeah.
I guess the observation I would make, though, about whether that was a war zone or not, is the fact that in a war zone, everybody's armed. And clearly in that video, not everybody was armed. And so
tell that to the cops that are inside the armored vehicles. They were pretty convinced that maybe not everybody was armed, but enough were.
You know, you have this toxic mix of people with guns and people without guns, and a confused young man, I would say, it to be charitable, in Kyle Rittenhouse. So I guess I would say then further that while I do not think America will ever be a country of low gun ownership, it's also true that a majority of Americans are willing to have some more control over guns, so that perhaps it's a little bit more difficult for a 17-year-old to be carrying an AR long gun.
All right, here's what I'm going to say. Kyle was not confused. All right, he wasn't confused. He knew why he was there. As he's walking around, he knows he has a purpose. He wasn't confused. Might have been a little frightened after Rosenbaum started chasing him, but confused? No, I don't see it. So I'll go ahead and wrap this one up for this time. I'm going to have probably a couple more. It's a long video. It's almost 1 hour and 40 minutes or something like that. So I will be breaking this thing up into sections again. I do want to point out, however, with one exception, I think we have here a bunch of sensible, reasonable people. Also, you don't sense the same hostility towards Kyle that you get amongst the average public. And I think as we're going to watch on more and more as they discuss it, they're going to come to a more even-keeled view towards him. This is only going to benefit him. I'm telling you, as the jury sees more and more of the evidence, they're going to start to understand that, you know what? What I thought originally had happened didn't happen. It wasn't like that. I may need to kind of rethink this. And I have a feeling that old Binger is up against a pretty tall order here. If Kyle is convicted, it won't be because the jury deep down was convinced he was guilty. It's going to be because they got fearful of their lives. And I think Binger, that's what he's going to try to push. I think he's going to move this thing into the realm of propaganda and terror. Like my video and subscribe to my channel. And stay tuned. I'm going to have another couple more rounds of this coming up.